Hi, everybody. This is John Ernest, also known as Internet Janitor. Welcome to the stream for Octo Jam 7, the seventh annual Chip 8 Game Jam. I'm joined here tonight by John Turp, who's doing our streaming,
Hello.
Everdread,
Hey, it's me, Everdread.
and Mastigofferin.
Hello, it's me, Mastigofferin.
So let's start taking a look at some games.
Yeah, sounds good. Which one do you want to start with?
You did this when you put out the jam. You had two concepts of your own, right? That you had people kind of see as either something to branch off of or to just get an idea of how to do some script writing. Do you want to show that off first?
Yeah, sure. We could take a look at the template games. So let's start with Into the Garlicscape then.
All right. Well, here is Into the Garlicscape.
Good font.
So this is kind of a template for a simple roguelike style game. We've got a character, you can move on a grid, everything's turn-based. You're already playing here on the title screen if you just start pressing arrows. And the goal is to explore a series of procedurally generated levels and collect enough garlic to unlock the way to the fabled Chalice of Yarnham.
Pretty cool.
So we've got various different mobs that move around. There's moths that can chew on you. There's cockroaches. Sometimes you'll find llamas, and if you hug them, they'll refill your health. And there are collectible alliums. Those are those kind of pumpkin, garlic-looking things. And right now you're being stomped on.
I thought that was something I should have hugged.
No.
That's not
Llamas look quite a bit different. But you are completely avoiding the actual objective of the game right now.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was forced to pick that one.
So you can kill moths by swatting at them. You can't kill the roaches, but they move in a predictable pattern by following walls. So it's kind of a matter of finding your way around. Sometimes decisions about when you grab an allium or leave it behind will help you sort of steer the cockroaches around.
I'm a big fan of the color palette here.
It is a sweet color palette, it really is.
Reminds me a lot of Caves of Quad.
Very minty.
Yeah, that was definitely something I had in mind when I made this. And I think that it's reasonably effective for having a very, very simple tile set. It reads pretty okay.
Is it just 3 colors?
Yes. And so one of the tricks that I'm doing here is I'm using ExoChip color planes. The way that this works is basically you've got a pair of Chip 8 displays that are stacked on top of one another. And you have one color for one plane, one color for the other plane. When they're on top of one another, they give you a fourth stacked color.
Whoa, ROM is too large. Can't rerun it. Oh, it's probably because I opened it from a cartridge at first. Yeah,
there you go. So by having both the overlap color and one of the planes be this sort of minty green color, I effectively make that color be opaque. And there are a number of games that use this basic trick to accomplish something like that.
Yeah, I ended up doing something similar myself.
So the main goal in designing this was just to make sure that it contained all of the salient features that you would want in a more elaborate roguelike. Since we've got mobs, and their logic is broken out in a way that's pretty modular. You can have pickup items, randomly generated levels, as well as static levels. So you could take this in a lot of different directions if you wanted to. I think that you've pretty much seen what the gameplay is like, unless you want to try to get to the ending, John.
No, we should move on.
I was going to quickly ask, is there much of Black Rainbow in this game, or the lessons that you learned from it?
There are some similarities, but the main difference is that in Black Rainbow, I was trying to really squeeze the game to fit in S-chip restrictions, and game is more generous. It runs at 1,000 cycles, and so that's really critical to having more elaborate NPC behavior like I have here.
Yeah. Oh, that's a hug llama.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hug it repeatedly?
Yeah, you can hug llamas as much as you want.
Just like in real life.
Exactly.
But you only have 3 hearts to fill, just like in real life.
So let's take a look at Super Neat Boy, which is the other example game.
Okay. Let's see. Super Neat Boy.
So aside from roguelikes, the most iconic style of game that people might want to imitate is a platformer. So I took this in kind of a Metroidvania sort of direction because that was the most use space, John.
Okay, I was trying all of them. Up on the arrow keys, up on the wasp.
I think you don't have a good track record with these spikes, John. That's every spike possible hit.
It's actually a game about collecting spikes.
Oh, nice.
That might be an interesting mechanic. But so this game has levels that you can enter and exit. There's a unique spawn zone for every edge of the map you enter on, so that way you can avoid getting stuck in loops or whatever, and support exploring around arbitrarily. This game uses a 3-color palette as well. And there's a little bit of an extra trick to it because you don't move on a grid here, you move freely. You will notice that everything that hurts you is pink. And then there's also the leaves that you're collecting. So I use the fact that the player is pink and those items are pink for hit detection purposes. Anything that happens to be pink that isn't a leaf, which is sort of handled specially, is just treated as the danger color.
How do I drop down?
You don't.
Okay.
I think you take the long way, John.
So again, the idea was to get some of the most important ideas in a platformer and kind of just demonstrate that it's possible to do all of these things. We've got physics and platforms and spikes and enemy mobs and pickups and all of that stuff. It would be very easy to remix this with new graphics and levels and even new hazards because of the danger color thing. And then depending on what else you wanted to add to the game, it might be more complex. I tried to make sure that in each of these template games, there's more than a kilobyte of code space still available for people to put their own stuff in if they wanted to.
Yeah, to monkey around. How was it implementing like platformer mechanics in Chip 8? Because like they're not easy with modern programming languages sometimes to get it really feeling right.
Yeah, it's definitely fiddly, and I think that the physics I ended up with here are still a little bit slippery, but a lot of people find that they can get used to it. Some of the affordances, like the little dust poofs and the sound effects, help make people a little bit more precise than they would otherwise be.
The platforms being very forgiving is something a lot of modern platformers don't do, but I really appreciate how you can kind of fudge these a bit and panic back onto them.
You definitely have some coyote time when you run off of things. The test points are all set up so that you have a significantly larger bounding box than it looks like you ought to when it's helpful, and the other way around when it isn't. This leaf up here is probably the hardest jump in the whole game.
The acceleration is nuts.
Yeah, like a ton of dime, isn't it? But yeah, that's...
So anyway.
Where is it, IJ? Where's the acceleration value?
Well, one thing that might be a little bit interesting is that this game doesn't use fixed point for anything. Instead, the way you control things like horizontal movement uses a very simple integral acceleration value that isn't very tunable, but the jumping arc is based on a lookup table. So it's actually extremely easy to change that.
Neat. All right. What's next?
Okay. Let's move on to. I have these in sort of loose order of when they were submitted. Let's look at Fest by Jacob Oko.
I hope this is about Uncle Fester.
This is the game of going Fest. So this is just like a reaction time timer. It's pretty simple, but I think it's very nicely presented.
It themed very well. It would be
It
nice.
was inspired by, I think, like a New York Times article or something like that, where they had like a, test your reaction speed and see how old you're supposed to be based on how slow your reflexes are.
What's your best score, IJ?
I'm pretty sure that I can get 13 or 14.
I played this game. It's one of the few games I played. My best score was 1.
Nice.
I had no idea that was even possible.
Because, in principle, if you just try exactly what John's doing right here for long enough, you maybe a little bit longer, you will eventually.
That was it. I got 0. I got 0.
You'll have to highlight it on the video.
Yeah, I think. Or maybe I just saw something else.
So I guess the lesson here is always debounce, and whenever you have a random delay, have it be a random delay plus a bit.
I think he's still running too close to the wind, as it were.
One thing that would be nice here is I really like the expression on the jack-o'-lantern, but having a few different ones for the bands of times would be really nice for like almost a surprise expression if you do it really fast, that sort of thing, or like a really crummy looking one if you take forever. That could be a nice little bit of just extra visual flair. It probably wouldn't take too long to come up with some fun faces.
Okay, I think that we've seen about all there is to see with this game. Let's move on to the submission by Gibble Claustro. So this is like gameplay-wise one of my favorites.
Ooh, they hit the corners.
Because I really like Jezball, and this is an extremely competent implementation of Jezball.
I definitely played a lot of Jezball as a kid.
All right. So
I think you need to press E.
Spacebar.
So level 1.
All right.
And you're dead.
I don't know what's happening.
When you lose, it does this kind of random scramble for a while and then resets.
I don't know what I'm doing at all.
So in Jezball, you've got a ball bouncing around, and you have the ability to make horizontal or vertical like divisions of the playfield. And you want to finish drawing a line to separate out like the area that a ball is in from the area that isn't. And then if you can do that without the ball hitting it, then you sort of claim that area. And you keep boxing in the ball until you've filled most of the space.
So you definitely want to go vertical to start at least. Can you only do horizontal, or can you do vertical as well?
You can do vertical.
Fully confident in that.
One feature for Octo that might be cool is the ability to have a README that kind of pops up next to the game.
So on the itch page, if you played it through that, I think most people have taken to putting their instructions in that. But obviously your experience right now through the cartridges is you don't see that.
How do you go horizontal at all?
I believe Q and E. Is there a keybind for a Q?
Yeah, it's Q.
Because something that we've had in recent times is more like keybinds that people are familiar with that are available.
Yeah, usually what a lot of games go for in terms of control schemes is ASWID for directional movement and Q and E as your action buttons. And this is sort of reinforced by the way that that Octo handles touch controls. if you happen to be playing on a mobile device, it's possible to configure a game to run with a gamepad, and that is mapped to those controls, with Q and E being your sort of action 1 and action 2.
This is the first time you've ever played Jazzball, John?
I played a similar game as a kid on one of those bar top like arcade machines.
Yeah,
I remember it from the Microsoft Entertainment Pack.
Yep.
Windows 95.
What?
That also had Breakout, right?
I don't think there was a Breakout. There was Chips Challenge, Ski Free, Jazzball, Tetravex, the Mahjong
Pipe
Solitaire,
Was there
and a couple versions of regular Solitaire that I always thought were extremely boring at the time. I think you got kind of lucky with no.
Jazzball will get you.
It's also worth noting that this game does have a cheat code when you're at the title screen.
It's sending you back to level 1 is so harsh.
It is.
Yeah, but you can do the levels really
code
fast.
basically gives you a level select.
You need risk in Jazzball.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely Jazzball.
Whoa.
Whoa. I have not seen that run before. That's
what
quite
did you
interesting.
You broke the bounds of Jazzball. It's not supposed to do
I
that.
can't actually do anything right now.
Of
And
course you
pressing other stuff is is causing some very odd things to happen.
This is where the real game begins.
This giving me Card Sharp vibes.
What happens when Jazzball break their bounds?
IJ Card Sharp was so good.
Maybe talking about cheating in the game too much, too openly, has angered it.
All right, our next game is Invisible Man.
Like, real quickly, has anyone made like an advanced version of Jazzball, like a modern extra mechanic one?
Well, yeah, like I said,
Jibble has clearly.
There is there are several bar top touchscreen cabinets that have very advanced versions of Jazzball. But yeah, the Invisible Man. What am I doing here?
Go ahead.
I was going to say that game reminded me of Quicks on the C64.
These men are all much too visible for my liking.
So the idea here is that you're walking along a hallway and trying to avoid being bumped into by oblivious people. I should note that this is based on the book Invisible Man, as opposed to like the H.G. Wells The Invisible Man. And I'm not going to attempt to butcher the novel this is actually about by summarizing it, because I'm not well enough informed on that. But you can find some more information about the background on the itch page. And
this does not play particularly very good. It's very stuttery. As you can see, this is me holding a key down. You don't seem to have a lot of control. You seem to want to just stick to this edge here, because they always tend to go into the bottom right there and drift slowly toward the left. Also, not having any vertical control, pretty common in games like this.
Sounds like a faithful adaptation
of the game. Well, I think that based on my understanding of the source material, a lack of control is somewhat thematically relevant. The one thing about this game is that it's kind of on the large side for a Chip 8 game. It's 3,194 bytes, but it was submitted in an obfuscated form. So it's kind of difficult for me to say whether or not there's more to this game than we're seeing. I'm not really sure. I played it for a while, and it seems to mostly be this gameplay that we've been seeing. And as far as I can tell, it seems to be implemented in such a way that it would work correctly on a Cosmac VIP. you'll notice that it's actually running at 7 cycles per frame, which is as slow as Octo will go. It's arguably a little bit slower than the VAP was.
You feel it.
Can you bump it up and see how it feels at like 100?
Still very stuttery, and it's still like movement. The room you have to move is very limited.
Again, I do think that may be an intentional choice. Anyway, there may be more to this game, but this is as much as I've been able to figure out about it so far. I would highly encourage other people to try this on their own.
All right. Next game is Ladyrunner at this the name of this cartridge. Oh.
Yeah, so this is Ladyrunner by Noodles.
Okay.
So this game was, according to the author, based on the game from a previous year called Horsey Jump.
What?
So the gameplay is very similar. In Horsey Jump, you're a horse and there are fences coming at you and you need to successfully jump over them. In this game, there's beetle people or something, baddies, coming at you, and you need to use your princess powers to defeat them.
This is... I have no idea what's happening.
This was I tried this game as well, and this was my experience. Hey, you won.
What do you want?
With a rank E, I guess, or does that mean end, or does that mean push E?
I'm not really clear on what the numbers are intended to mean. It might be your score.
Color palette's nice.
Yeah.
I like the face in the center. Or maybe it's a turnip.
This is Octolander by Private Butts. I love Moonlander, so...
Yeah, this was sort of a Hail Mary last-minute submission. You can use WAS to control, sort of send impulses, and R will reset the level if you want. It's just one level, but I think it's pretty fun and complete as far as just a plain old Chip 8 game goes.
Yeah, very cool.
And the source code is only 700 bytes. I think that this might actually be a pretty decent one to study and learn more. You might be able to modify the source code and riff on it a little bit. It's reasonably well commented.
All right, moving on. Push Foo's No Internet. Hey, a classic. Wait,
so the biggest problem
with
this game is that it does not self-reset.
No.
Which it really, really kills it. Apart from that, I think it's a very good implementation of what it's doing, cloning the Firefox no internet connection game. But the fact that you can die within a few frames of the game starting, like it doesn't give you a title screen or push E to start or anything, and it doesn't self-reset, makes it a lot less fun than it could be.
It's it's just like what Google did. They had to put a parental blocker in there for it, so it's just keeping the kids from having too much fun. You hear about that?
Also,
in schools, they actually have to block this.
There's also you can press S to duck, but I don't think there are actually any obstacles that require that. At least, not that I was able to notice.
I want to go in and change this ducking sprite to be a duck. So it's just a literal duck button.
Just become a goose, perhaps.
It's a duck button, not a goose button.
I don't know.
Well, you want both buttons, ideally.
But yeah, you got to get that.
No score either.
Yeah, the score. I was just about to say, you can't have a high score either as a remembrance thing.
What a bummer. Was there a theme this time?
Not really, no.
The number 7.
I wonder what royalty-free chill hop we're gonna put behind this video.
I guess when this is streamed, people will know.
People will know. They'll be hearing it right now. We won't be.
We can pretend.
Do you think this might work on Superchip?
Okay.
Well, it's using exochip features.
Okay.
Octo Space program. Different programs are requesting some wildly different like ratios here.
So there's basically two aspect ratios that an Octo program can run in. We have the horizontal mode, which is the way that a Chip 8 program would traditionally run. And several years ago, I added a feature that lets you metaphorically tip the TV 90 degrees to the right or to the left. And so that makes it possible to do portrait-oriented games.
What aspect
This
ratio is
pretty
the
much what it
actual
sounds like on
cosmetic?
the tin. It's a minimalist reinterpretation of
Why you play this? Doesn't seem to want to run.
do you not have...
Oh wait.
There you go.
Tell you what, John, your zoom level might be such that it's actually cutting off the top and bottom of the screen. Yeah, there we go. To answer your question, Everdread, it's 2-to-1, I think.
Oh, I see.
It's twice as wide as it is tall.
That's a fun aspect ratio. That's a significantly wider than generally found for most displays. That's approaching, I think, the 2.1 that you'd sometimes see in certain films.
I really like the little takeoff animation and the way that it uses the natural smearing of Chip 8 overdraw in order to make the smoke trail and everything.
So what's the game here? What do I do?
So when you're on the pad at the beginning, or when you've blown up, you should be able to use the arrow keys to, you can cycle between different parts that get put in different stages. And if you play through multiple launches, it seemed to be that every time I successfully completed a launch, I unlocked a few more parts. And then it was possible to get my rocket to go further.
It's really, really difficult to understate how important on-screen instructions are.
It's kind of harder.
It feels like the game just wasn't working, or it was just that screen. I love games like this, though. This is a genre of mobile game that I enjoy quite a bit, which is literally this. This is a take on a free-to-play mobile game where you time your taps to get it to launch, and then you repeatedly launch until you get money enough to buy better parts, and you just watch yourself kind of fly through the solar system.
It's very relaxing. I think the gameplay on this is kind of minimalist. Could probably have been made more elaborate, but the visuals are really relaxing and peaceful to watch, and I like the palette.
You seem to have, to some extent, nailed it, John. Like you're just going and going, maybe forever.
Yeah, I wonder why.
You notice how many planets are in the solar system.
Hey, maybe I'm in orbit around the sun and I'm just going around. Or there's 3 Earths.
There's a lot of Saturns.
I think that left and right have some sort of influence while you're flying. I'm just a little bit unclear on that.
Press space again.
Probably burns your next stage. Yeah.
I think you won.
Woo!
That was it.
Lost in space. That's actually a lost condition.
Yeah, I wasn't really able to determine through play what it was that was causing me to unlock more things. I think that a little bit more feedback about that might have been better.
Ooh.
The graphics are really sick in this. Like, they look really good.
So is that just a random occurrence, or did I set up my rocket improperly?
I think it's on you, Joe.
The game is communicating absolutely nothing.
It's called Mystery. Mystique.
I'll just mash spacebar. Oh. Don't mash spacebar, because...
Cool Stack Overflow.
Yeah, it looks to me like this game's reset logic may be leaving stack chunk behind. This is sort of a classic problem.
Yeah, you can see, yeah.
On chip 8, you've only got 12 levels or 16 levels in Super Chip and newer stack entries. So we're moving on to one of several snake-oriented games. This is one of the more visually expansive snake games that we got.
It's beautiful.
So I remember a few years ago or last year, people were really experimenting with the sound chip that you put in.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any advancements on that front? Have people gotten? I know people were trying to get voices in, but it ended up taking up the whole cartridge.
There's a couple of games that we're going to see later that do in fact do some pretty interesting stuff with sound. There's one that is also snake oriented, although you could argue that it's not a snake game. That manages to have full-on music.
That's exciting.
So this game is, which I should mention because I think we skipped over it a little bit. This is Worm by Rstein. This game is written using only standard chip 8 instructions at the standard resolution. It's pretty small. It's a little bit over a kilobyte. And while it is clocked at 500 cycles per frame, if you were to run this at a realistic speed, it's actually just fine. I didn't notice that it impacted gameplay very much, aside from the fact that it makes the controls a little bit less responsive. So I think that the use of speed here is mainly so that the game can get faster and faster over time, and not really something intrinsic about getting the graphics to work or anything like that. So this would probably work fine on a VIP if you tried it there. And of all of the snake games that we've tried, this one feels really good, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
That's getting pretty fast.
What's it eating? Is it cookies?
Eggs?
Yeah.
What snakes eat?
Well, it's a worm, and worms love cookies.
It's true.
It does kind of read as a worm, doesn't it?
What is it? It's called a worm, right?
It is called Worm. That is true.
I do really appreciate the fact that it happens to only contain text that uses the built-in hex font.
I see. It's the A.
And the D.
That's good. That's resourceful.
What?
So there's a built-in font now? Is that new?
So Chip 8 always had a built-in font with hexadecimal characters. In standard Chip 8, you have access to some little, they're like 4 by 5 pixel characters. And in Super Chip 8, they expanded this to larger ones. But the problem is that in Super Chip 8, you only have the decimal numbers. You don't have A through F as well. This is actually something that we didn't have very good documentation or knowledge of until people like Masty started doing experiments on an actual HP48.
That's pretty
neat. We actually pulled the font out of it as well, which is now available, I think, in Octo, should you desire it.
Yeah, there is very little standardization as to what the characters would actually look like in these fonts. Some of them even use different sizes.
At some point, around 15 is when it actually gets to the point where you actually have to predict your turns many frames in advance. Where other snake-like games kind of give you like a like a quarter-second leeway.
I think it's kind of interesting that we've seen quite a few Snake games in Chip 8, but we have not yet seen a Light Cycles game. And when you think about it, the Light Cycles would actually be even easier than Snake because you wouldn't have to worry about erasing the trail. Chip 8 Collision would make that almost totally trivial. Maybe an example game for next year.
Maybe.
Well, usually there's AI, though, in light cycle games, right? And that would be probably pretty difficult to implement a good one, wouldn't it?
All right.
I guess it depends on what good.
Moving from Worm to Steve Rolls Snake. Oh, wait, what? Didn't go left.
Someone... That sounds like an excuse.
And also it doesn't auto-reset. Yeah, I can't go left. I can only go one direction. And it's down.
R is the key for resetting this game.
No, that does not do anything. Oh, Z? Z. So, yeah. The arrow keys do, Jack.
Maybe your snake is depressed.
You should try using the 1 through 4, 1 through Z. Sometimes games will map to a different set of keys. In Octo, the arrow keys just get mapped to ASWD as sort of a alternative, and space maps to E.
Yeah, okay. I see how other game controls work.
Also, this game is just completely obfuscated.
Yeah, so this was a game that was written using a different assembler. So it was not written in Octo. It just happens to be running in Octo as like a convenience for presentation. And I believe that there's some information about a GitHub repository with the assembler that this author used and the actual source code for it, as opposed to just that somewhat unhelpful hex dump.
All right, moving on. System logoffs. D8GN. It's supposed to say dungeon.
That's what system logoff said. I still think that the only way you could pronounce that is Dagon. So this is Dicey Dungeon in exochip form.
That's great.
Good art, as always.
Yeah, the presentation is really fantastic.
Wow, look at that. Pokemon in Chip 8 finally.
So, have you ever played Dicey Dungeon before, John?
Mm-mm.
The idea is that you get a certain number of die rolls, and then you can apply them to different skills that your character has in order to, sort of use the move that makes best use of them. I found this fairly hard, although part of that is just because of the randomness.
Right.
And in Dicey Dungeon, it's 6-sided dice, whereas these are 8-sided dice because, of course.
I don't seem to be doing damage.
I think you're missing repeatedly.
So what you've got at the bottom, it's sort of using up your rolls from right to left, I believe. And so...
These reload tape, oh wow.
So for each thing that you roll, like you've got a 4 here, you need to use that with an ability where it will do the thing that you want it to do.
Right, but the starting abilities we're giving here don't really give us much.
Yeah, if you have an odd, you do the 1. If you have an even, you do the other.
Right.
Yeah, like here we do the odd. And we get a card.
And in the real Dicey Dungeon, it is kind of like that, where sometimes you just don't really have what you need. I think that one of the major design points around this was trying to figure out what card descriptions could possibly fit in the amount of visual space there is. I think that the use of the palette and the way that the sprite overdrawing effects work is really fantastic in this.
Like this game doesn't look like it's only got 4 colors.
For sure.
It's pretty frustrating. I understand it's probably balancing stuff like this is super difficult.
Yeah. I tried this a few times and I was not able to get all the way to the end, but I am willing to believe that there is a way to do it if you use the right strategy.
That fight is super easy once you get the basic mechanics down.
Mm-hmm. It's the second one that always seemed to destroy me.
Seems like you really have to get lucky with your odds.
Yeah, you just have to get 2 odds.
Quite literally.
So it seems to just kind of revolve around this one card.
Yeah. Well, you can do that card 3 times and do it. Oh, you have to recover health. That's a big factor.
Yeah.
There you go.
Odds are really strong.
You're a master.
We did it.
Well done.
Yeah, it's great.
Happy Halloween.
One day we'll get a Pokemon game in Octo, and it'll be like 7 cartridges like a Final Fantasy game.
For each battle.
Labyrinth by Tempfar.
Yeah, so the full name is Labyrinthine. So this is a stock Chip 8 game. It's pretty big. It's 2.8K, and it runs at a fairly slow frame rate. So it would definitely work on a VIP based on the examination I gave. And it's basically a huge maze where you're trying to find all of the things.
So it's like adventure almost.
Yeah, it's like an adventure that is stripped down to its barest essentials. Something Tobias was saying that I tend to agree with is that I could totally see myself playing this on a calculator while like taking the bus or something to school.
Yeah.
I can see myself playing
It's
this
that kind of game.
in class. Tetris and all the classics you would do instead of your work. We had a kid with the cable.
Oh yeah, the link cable.
He was the arbiter of games. These days
you get to play Space War and Beer Hunt and so on.
These days the kids, the same price we paid, the kids are getting like color LCD screens and they run Doom.
Everything runs Doom now.
Yeah, Birth Control runs Doom.
Yes, it does. It does actually.
Yeah.
Although those birth control strips were referencing something that happened probably completely out of date by the time you're watching this video. But someone took apart an electronic pregnancy test and found that the chips inside humorously were extremely inefficient. And something about bio-waste. And then the chips could actually be used to do way more than they were being used for.
Although it's worth noting that the actual Doom port was like, at that point he'd swapped out all the electronics in the thing and it was pretty much just the case.
Right. Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah. It didn't have a dot matrix LCD.
No,
I suppose that makes sense.
Anyway,
I was hoping he had just swapped out the LCD and kept the processors that were actually already in there.
No dice. So yeah, I think this is a really fun game, but obviously because it's kind of just a maze and you're just looking for one sort of thing, there isn't a lot of variety to it. So by the time you've explored about a quarter of the maze, you've kind of explored the whole maze. I think that it would have been neat to see a little bit more variety to it, just things to find, whether it's maybe messages or, weird drawings on walls or like more special animations, things that move. I think that the maze design here is sort of obeying Euclidean space, so it would be maybe possible to play with that a little bit, have some mysterious changing non-Euclidean maze parts.
Because I played this, and I think the thing that I most longed for was the ability to know where the one thing that I was missing was. Because you can
an indicator or something.
Having their pixels blink on the big map on the top right, that'd be really helpful.
Or maybe even if it was like a resource that you could consume, you could do this a few times.
The other thing was that I believe it's using blocking input, so you have to push left, release, left, release, left, release over and over.
You have to tap like crazy.
And on a calculator, that's especially not fun, right?
Yeah, that's going to get you in trouble in math class.
Do you want to explain why?
It's gonna beep every time. I just realized. Oh boy!
Yeah,
you can turn the beeping off. You can turn the beeping off, but it's still gonna go click, 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 click.
Yeah. So on what isn't really clear from knowing about the HP48, unless you actually try it on the real hardware, is that the blocking input instruction beeps every time. It's totally independent of like the buzzer register that you would normally use to make sound effects happen.
Yeah, we've discovered all sorts of interesting things about the buzzer register and how it is tied into the frame rate limiter this year. Specifically that it loops much faster than it's supposed to in certain circumstances, and you can actually make it make different pitches. And we had a game some years ago that was a 2048 clone, and it worked quite nicely on the HP48. And I was like, oh, it's got all these different cool sounds. I wonder how they did that. And as far as I can tell, complete accident based on how they did input and frame dropping. But it works really well.
And you were doing some experiments with seeing if you could sort of programmatically control that in a sane way, right?
Yeah, I ultimately I wasn't able to, but in principle, if you don't use the frame rate, the delay register to make the frame rate consistent, you can actually use the varying instruction length of each individual instruction, because some of them take more cycles of the processor to tune how fast the buzzer buzzes. So it might be possible to make some kind of primitive cave person music by doing particular math operations in particular ways, or loading a certain amount of registers.
The only problem is that it would be an immense pain to try to support that in emulators.
Well, exactly right. Who could enjoy it? The answer is nobody. Nobody would enjoy it.
Well, you and Tobias so far.
Yeah,
I think we should let John escape from the labyrinth.
Yes.
I'm done. I've escaped.
You're never done.
Okay.
Oh wow.
So this is 3D Viper Maze. This is.
Is that what that says?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it could be Viper Maze, but they're definitely snakes.
Wow, look at this. Look at these graphics. Now, for some reason, seeing this makes me want to see Factorio in kind of a similar aesthetic.
Is it because of the people making 2D engines or 2.5D engines in Factorio?
This is intense.
It's really awesome.
Yeah,
and
holy crap.
There is in fact like music and sound effects and stuff.
Yeah, I think the people at home can.
Stream, but...
I think you can kind of hear it. Do you hear it at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it low because it's quite loud.
Yeah, but so there's a really interesting blog post that was done by the author of this game where he talks about everything that he had to do in order to kind of multiplex the timing of these different asynchronous events. He's got music going, he's got player input and movement, and he's got snakes that are moving around in the maze. And all of those things have to happen in sort of a software schedule, since there's only one delay timer to share between all of them. And I just think everything about the presentation of this is fantastic.
Yeah, like
it's
the
also
cutscenes when you get bit, and there's different cutscenes when you get hit from different sides, which is an amazing touch.
Mhm. And what's kind of fascinating is that the core mechanism of this type of engine, where you have sort of pre-rendered 3D, is actually very simple in terms of code. And it's everything that's wrapped around this that adds a lot of complexity to the implementation. The essential part of what you're doing is that you've got the screen divided into a couple of different squares. And for each of those squares, you're kind of doing like one canned raycast in order to look up a relative tile in the map in order to determine what piece of a bitmap you should draw on that piece of the screen. So the code is pretty simple. It involves some very elaborate lookup tables and a ton of drawing of all of these sprites in order to make it look the way that it does, which is fantastic.
Very easy to get lost, though.
I have noticed that.
I forgot about this excellent map they put together.
Yeah, because there is an indication of which direction you're facing when you're in the map, but it's a little bit ambiguous. And I found it pretty easy to like keep turning around and getting stuck in the same corner. I think that some of the ambiguity might have been better if it had been able to have like 2 or 3 variations of wall textures, so that as you turned around, it wouldn't necessarily look the same from as many positions. But I know that that could really strain managing to fit in those many graphics. As it was, though, this is only using about a third of the overall storage that Exochip gives you. So it seems like it might be possible to do something like that in a later iteration.
Yeah, I would think that could be an option. Like I would, if I had that much memory, I would be thinking of ways to at least change it up from level to level. Maybe, I don't know, within the same level, how you would make sure it worked right, I suppose. And it might be difficult with the palette.
Right.
Snakes aren't really all that fun because it's just you can't really do much.
Yeah, you pretty much. I found myself sort of playing from the map a lot once I started dealing with significant snake problems.
You should be able to charm the snakes.
Yeah, gotta get the flute.
Collect them. Stick them in a bag.
Use your Ring of Charms, which adds a +1 to all convincing rolls.
How do I get out of here? This is the walls move, but the map doesn't update, so...
I think it does, actually. But you may be just hitting the same button repeatedly.
Both.
A button that you've already gotten.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Oh, don't go down that hallway.
That's a snake, right? Because it reminds me of a game that I played once in like a French class.
Oh, there we go.
At school. And I can tell you, I was absolutely terrible at French. I had no idea what anything in the game was saying. I had no idea what was happening. But I was the first person to finish that game by just aggressively brute forcing, collecting all items, moving into every location.
I think... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like the game sort of encourages you to do that. But because the snakes just appear and instant kill you, you don't have time to even acknowledge their presence ahead of you. You're just going to run headfirst into them. Because a lot more people think like that now.
Well, what I've just noticed is that the map persists.
All right.
So as you discover snakes and buttons, the snake is now marked because of that.
That's super cool.
Yeah, that is a really, really good touch.
Because at least that way, like, I would get surprised if I did something wrong in that game that I had no idea what was happening in. And you would have no way to know where you were even. You were just, following the right-hand wall or something. Whenever a maze comes up, I immediately do either a right or left-hand wall rule. Just put your hand on the wall and just navigate everywhere. Like, I don't know why people don't do that. There were whole levels of Max Payne that I never had to explore because the left-hand rule instantly took you to the exit.
I don't think I ever noticed that about Max Payne, and in retrospect, I feel very stupid for not having just tried that.
Because there's those kind of intermission levels where you're in you have to
do it like 3
labyrinth,
times in the course of the game.
But it's always worked for me. I feel like in this case, that snake is getting you from the side, right?
Yeah, but I'm trying to get the button behind him. So how long until we get a sort of Wolfenstein-looking game in Octo?
Well, we know that it's technically possible. There have been some very vague tech demos of doing raycasting stuff. It's not going to be possible at any sort of reasonable emulation speed for the older platforms, but I think it can be done at ludicrous speed on Exochip. And if anything, this definitely proves that we've got an alternative compromise available. Something that I'm a little bit curious about is how much more painful it would make the engine for something like this if you tried to add another degree of freedom and make like the faux 3D version of Descent.
Oh no, you'd have to have such a you'd have to be running at like 10,000 cycles.
Well, the general technique for this type of 3D is not really that expensive. Like I was saying, it's really just about a lot of complex level data and lookup tables and a whole bunch of canned variations on graphics. Arranging all those is kind of tedious. I think it would be possible to add another degree of freedom. It's just, it might make the number of variations that you need extremely painful to fit into this space. And you'd also sort of multiply the problem of distinguishing viewpoints from one another by a significant amount.
Yeah, because how would you do the map for one, right?
Right. You'd have to show slices or something. It would be terrible. So I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying it's an ambitious concept.
Yeah, I can kind of see it. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Now we got no map.
Are you gonna try to see if you can complete this whole thing, John?
Nope. Alright, we're gonna move on.
One snake too many for John.
Alright, so our next game is gonna be Accurate by Tom Art.
Okay, so this is one of the more graphically impressive titles that we've seen here. Tom really went all out in trying to create an interesting intro cinematic for this. And he's making excellent use of the multiple planes that you can use for graphics in Exochip.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I love the text treatment. All right, so we're going to do kinda.
And just check out those little transitions. Eat your heart out, Persona.
This is very reminiscent of Mach Rider. Those cars are pretty...
A lot of people said that when you die, it kind of looks like you turn into a pile of poop.
That's what I was thinking, but I didn't vocalize that thought.
I love the game over Kaneda scream. See, now that I've articulated it, you can't unsee it. So this game
doesn't help.
The game starts out pretty simple, but once it starts adding lanes closing, it actually gets really hard. And yeah, if you choose Tetsuo, you just die instantly. That was a bug, and Tom decided that it was hilarious and thematically appropriate if you've seen the movie. So we just kept it in.
Are you? This is wow. I have to just do this and just hold it, pick a direction, make sure you have plenty of room.
It's a bit forgiving in how it does collisions. And then it'll show you a little sort of flashing X indicator on lanes when it's about to close one off. They're scheduled based on your score. I think everything about the game is pretty deterministic, aside from maybe where the enemies start. So like when it shows that X, you want to get out of that lane.
I was trying to cut over.
Important education about motorcycle safety.
It's very cool. Just a little bit of Tomohara's put so much polish into this. It looks so good.
It's crazy. And he did the whole thing in like 3 days.
Dang.
Yeah.
This is sick. It's really his most sophisticated effort yet.
And it works, and it's easy to understand. It looks very nice. The transitions, I'm always impressed by detail work and polish, especially when you're in an environment like this. It's just difficult to do that stuff.
The one thing that would have been kind of neat is seeing the background city slowly go up or down as a sort of like length progression. Like you're getting.
Yeah, so there you go. There's a closed lane. Yeah, it would be cool if he had like a couple of canned versions of the background and just sort of like cycled it out every once in a while, just so you get the sense of slowly progressing.
All right.
Does it run relatively quickly?
Yeah, it seems to be. Let's see. It's doing 100 cycles.
It's 100 cycles, which is pretty modest for a sophisticated exo chip game.
It seems to be using the fantasy ROM size.
Yeah, this is on the bigger size, but not like ridiculous or anything. This is about 16 kilobytes. So he's only using a quarter of the space that he could.
So how fast does like the fastest like S chip run?
So we worked out the S chip. It actually depends what you're doing. Graphics is one of the slowest things you can do on it, and on the faster calculator, the S chip interpreter usually gets about like 30 cycles cycles per frame even. But if you're doing like raw math, like if you're doing like a complicated calculation in the background, then you get closer to about 50. And so it's really not like outside the realm of possibility that a more powerful, dedicated piece of hardware would easily hit 100, I would expect.
I've cranked up the cycle speed to ludicrous, and it has seemingly just made the game smoother, which is very impressive.
Yeah, this game, like most of the games that people are writing in modern times, have some frame rate limiter code in them. And the way that generally works is that you kind of have a timer loop that's near the end of your game loop. And when you reach that, it'll burn off any excess time that is beyond what you've scheduled as kind of like your minimum delay per frame. So if you have code like that and you're on the edge where like sometimes you're kind of rubbing up against that limit, then raising the frame rate will give you a smoother and more responsive experience. But it also means that the game won't infinitely become better if you keep cranking it up. And for many of the oldest games, because resources were so constrained, you wouldn't really be able to get away with doing that frame limiting at all. But as a consequence, it means that if you try to run games like that on a modern emulator, you need to manually slow it down for the game to be playable.
Yeah. I mean, in principle, you kind of know how long like a cycle is going to be, like through your game loop. So if the game loop is as tight as it can be and is only just playable, like you're just adding more stuff to do by adding.
Oh, you know what it needed? It needed every point should have been an extra A on Canada. So you just have and it just goes on for so long.
So this is Sneak Surround by Tom Swan.
Yeah, so Tom Swan is notable for being the editor of Viper or Vipper, depending on how you decide to pronounce it, magazine, which is the original enthusiast group when the Cosmac VIP was around. So with Tom's participation, we've sort of closed all of the generations together into one big extended Chip 8 community. So this is another Snake game like we've seen a few versions of. In this one, the main gimmick is that it's got like a lot of level progression. It actually changes up kinds of obstacles that you see. Some aspects of the gameplay are randomized. Um, it uses kind of a smart placement method for coming up with where to put all of the food in order to ensure that they're distributed around the map reasonably well.
Yeah.
So it's visually one of the simpler Snakes, but in terms of its actual gameplay mechanics, it's quite sophisticated. And this is sort of a modernization of an older game that Tom made.
I was going to say, when it brings in the pellets, that it makes big, bold, they're right here's, and then flashes them, is so important when you're drawing stuff to the screen, when you have two colors.
Yeah.
And you're differentiating
to draw player attention to those things.
Yeah.
I will say I dislike Snake games that instantly game over you when you press in the opposite direction. Because it's just there to get you when you're trying to buffer inputs.
Right. I do tend to agree with that. It adds a little bit of complexity to check for that. And I would say that this is a Chip 8 game that's using totally stock Chip 8. I haven't totally confirmed it by picking this to pieces, but I believe that Tom wrote this so that it'll be compatible. And it's running at 20 cycles per frame. So this would absolutely work on a VIP. And that's part of what limits doing some of the really sophisticated game mechanic stuff. You only have a few cycles, and you've got to spend them very, very carefully.
I was going to say, can you go around the screen?
Yep. It does.
Yeah, it's when they do the hit delay, they don't accept any input, so it's very unfriendly for that. But very, very cool. I like a lot of the having the effects that happen when the new bits spawn in. Pretty cool. We're gonna circle around to the top of the list here to Chromatophore, Angel of Death.
Angle. That's my game.
Angle.
So I didn't get a title screen. The controls for this one, you're probably going to want WASD, the F key, and Q and E are going to be important for you. So the implication is that you're effectively the Grim Sweeper, and your goal is to clean up some things. And
what would you describe the creatures as being?
The random things that I came up with when I needed some graphics.
I have no idea what most of these things are, but I really, really like their little NPC animations.
Yeah, I like how dynamic it feels when you're rotating. There's a little bit of there's a fine control there that you don't really see a lot in Chip 8 games.
So the thing that I spent most of my time on was getting the rotation math to work and make sense and look good. The things that I didn't have much time to spend on was the elucidation of what it is that the gameplay is supposed to be, mainly because I didn't have much time to figure out what that was going to be ultimately. But the UI tries to draw your attention to certain items in the field that are black and not animating. And those are the things you have to do to complete the level. And
I only figured that out after you said that.
Yeah, so like what I wanted to do was do something a lot like Tom did in his game, which was flash the things that you needed to get in the intro, and tell you what to not hit, because you're supposed to be cleaning up, but you can't knock over the bookcase or the hat stand or what have you. So there's supposed to be like a big old cool fun story, and there's supposed to be all sorts of neat stuff, and there isn't any of it.
It's always the first thing to get cut.
Yeah, and what there is are 6 levels.
Do you think that you're going to revisit this at some point and try to...
I really want to. I'm actually running out of code space a little bit. So I might have to get your advice a little bit on some of the strategies that you've employed to have additional interpreted code, because a lot of the stuff that needs to be added is like, text and graphic scenes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the limitation for anybody who hasn't programmed in ExoChip before is that you have 64 kilobytes of RAM that you can put stuff in, but only the low 4 kilobytes of that, because of the way that chip aid instructions work, can have totally general purpose assembly instructions. Like, you can't have a jump instruction that jumps to somewhere in high RAM. And so that's where we kind of talk about code RAM versus data RAM. There are some ways around it, particularly if code doesn't have to run very fast. There are strategies where you can sort of make your game be very data oriented, including having some sort of an interpreter that loads bytecode from high RAM and then executes it, and you pay some sort of performance overhead for that.
Now, I'm not saying this because you're here and are within verbal punching distance of me, but this is awesome. This is actually my favorite game so far.
I know, the gameplay itself is really good, which is why I really hope that you have the time and mental energy to flesh out the rest of the parts of this thing, because this is like 60% of the way, maybe even more, to being like one of the best experiences on the platform.
This would have been good on like the Game Boy, like as a paid cartridge, probably like a little bit more polished than it would have been. Because the work you put into the rotational math and stuff makes this feel so smooth, and like I know what I'm aiming at.
So I actually went back and forth a few times on. So you'll notice that there's like a flickering crosshair, and the way you actually control the game is that crosshair is a point you're aiming at, and then you have a rotation that is applied to it that moves the little flashing crosshairs on the side. And I was trying to make it so it wasn't completely certain what it was you were aiming at.
Right.
And I'm not sure. I think this is the best compromise. But if that crosshair isn't there, it is absolutely impossible for most people to get an idea of how the game is controlling. Unless you explain it to them.
I've been completely ignoring the crosshair.
All right. Well, so it's working well then.
You just need
it flashes a little too quick for me to actually be able to see it.
Yeah, I think it might need slowing down a little.
John's vision is based on the opposite of movement.
Yeah, that's been what I've been doing a lot of. The opposite of movement's what I've been doing a lot of lately.
Tell me about it.
But for a while, I made it so that if you moved into the wall, you would actually continue to you would still continue to move. You wouldn't get stuck in the wall.
This would be like the secret ending is if you just aim at yourself.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's how you like restart a level.
Is this like the endless mode?
So this is basically an unfinished level with no win condition. So you're kind of stuck here forever.
Much like the actual Grim Reaper, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a...
Wait, would you be the Grime Reaper?
Well, the goal was at some point you would have something that you would actually need to reap. So you would your little broom would turn into a scythe, and you'd have to then only hit one thing. because most of the time it encourages you to hit multiple things to get a higher score. Like you get a combo for doing as few sweeps as possible. And the idea was that the levels would be like short, little fun, kind of boom, 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 boom sort of things. A little bit like, I don't suppose any of you have ever played Princess Remedy?
I did after you recommended it to me.
Right.
And it is indeed a very enjoyable little, like, I don't know, 45-minute experience.
Yeah. And all the individual levels in it are just these sort of fast little one and done with a little bit of cute dialogue. And that's kind of what I wanted to go for here. And
I found a way to pause buffer.
and so yeah, I would like to poke it a bit more and see what I can accomplish.
Please keep poking.
All right. Next game is Crate Mang with Octoparty Mix cartridge.
So this is sort of a take on a WarioWare style game. So some of these games I had a lot of difficulty understanding at first, and it's because you drop the hat on the octopus. This one's clear. Some of them are kind of hard to understand until until it speeds up. Okay, so just like hit E, and then you immediately get treasure. What confused me about this is that you only have to hit the button like once and you just win. But as that speeds up, you have to start hitting it more and more and more. So like at first I had no idea what the connection was. And then it started to make sense.
It was pretty cool.
I think that the animations are all really adorable.
Yeah.
This is really good.
Nice hat.
It is the frantic music of WarioWare definitely is a core aspect.
Enhances it a bit. We can fix that in post though.
We could, but we won't.
But yeah, and this game makes good use of like flashing stuff to make things stand out more. It's sort of bumping up against the space limitations of plain old vanilla chip 8, even though it is using exochip features. So it probably would be possible to flesh it out with a few more mini games, which would definitely multiply how fun it is. But even just with what we've got here, I think that the idea is very well executed. The only mini game that I found initially confusing was the digging one, for the reasons that I said. And like once you get into a rhythm.
Yeah, it seems to be only 3 or so mini games. No boss.
Why was there the bomb fuse there?
As like a time limit.
Oh, right, I figured that there would be a... Oh, I guess that makes sense, yeah. You don't have a fixed amount of time that you have to respond to any individual thing, but you do have a total overall time. And that uses a mechanic that's already part of the game.
Right.
All right. Oh, I got it right at the last frame. Oh well. Urlog with Only Good Die Neil Young. What? Only the Good Die Neil Young?
Yes.
Going off of these file names.
So this is an idle game that is based on. So you've got Emerson's, Lakes, and then you hit QWE and ASD to sort of like summon those things. And then if you get enough lakes, then you can purchase a Palmer, and so on and so forth.
Idle games are very much my jam. When Project Sparks came out, if anyone remembers Project Sparks, which was Microsoft's like weird Roblox thing they had with an integrated editor. First thing I tried to make was an idle game a while ago.
So one of the things that's interesting about this game is that it actually has like a clear win and lose condition for being this type of game. You've got a timer in the bottom left, and you are supposed to solve this by spending your resources on the right scions of music. So you've got a Crosby. And if you do not have enough power by the time the timer runs out, then you're doomed.
Seems like if you get it to 99, you can just...
Iki go burr.
Iki go burr. I'm pressing that E key. It ain't going burr. Is there something that's supposed to happen here?
I'm not entirely clear.
Let's try again. It seems like, I don't know if this is like an overflow or intentional. You can get it up to 99.
I believe that having them wrap around is an intentional mechanic. So you kind of have to stop at an appropriate time for best results. But you're also spending resources in order to unlock Palmer's, Crosby's, Stills, and so forth. I think it's a pretty interesting interpretation of an idle game. Like I was saying, the design decision that I thought was most interesting was making something that has the mechanics of an idle game, but also has a clear success fail.
This is very difficult to keep track of.
What have you done, John? How are you being good at this game? I don't understand. Why am I bad at this game?
There's some logic here that I have not fully puzzled out myself.
You need to understand that after years and years of just playing random jam games, John has ascended and is able to unconsciously succeed at a variety of games without truly understanding why.
Thing is, like when you're streaming a game, the part of your brain that is most critical to analyzing patterns is occupied at that moment with making sure your stream doesn't suck. So
yeah,
I've evolved my sixth sense of how to play esoteric jam games. I'm sure that'll help me in life. Anyway.
So up next we have a pretty simple one: Spot, Paper, Scissors by Fonts. This is an infinite, run game where you have an AI player that will make a decision, and you play rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock against them, like it says on the tin.
Yeah, without controls, this is...
So the controls are A is rock, S is paper, D is scissors, Z is lizard, and X is Spock. So it's kind of this little 5 cluster. But it is kind of difficult to remember that mapping while you're playing.
I seem to be doing just fine.
Statistically, yeah.
Has it figured me out? Has it downloaded me? For a moment there, it was honing in on what I was doing.
So gameplay-wise, it definitely succeeds at what it was attempting to do. And it does indicate, winner versus match in a reasonably intuitive way. I just kind of wish that this had used more animation or something to make it a little bit more impactful when you're making the decisions. You could have even had like a little timing element that was part of it, and that might make the gameplay a little bit more exciting. Because, in my experience of playing this, knowing how to play rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock doesn't seem very relevant. So it feels very abstracted.
All right. Next game is Bull 8 Hell by Flamore.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I have been sent to Octo Jam. There we go.
So this is our smallest submission this year, weighing in at only 97 bytes. And Flamore posted that he was really just trying to make this as minimalist as possible. He even apparently had a title screen and then removed it to make the game smaller.
Can you not shoot anything? Is it just avoid?
No.
This reminds me of that. We had an entry to Awful Jam a while ago for like one of the first ones that was just like Ness running against like a crowd, and you had to do this.
And it was probably like 10,000 times bigger than this implementation.
It was a Java game. It was a jar I had to install JRE for.
So for what it is, I think that this is implemented pretty well. This might be worth looking at if you're a beginner and you want to understand how to use these features. I do see, though, that there are a few opportunities for simplifying this further. So maybe if you want a fun exercise, take this and study the code a little bit and see where you can come up with to shave some bytes off.
Get the old code golf going. Engage your space cam brain.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him shaving so much code off that you have to be kicked back to the debugger to restart.
Yeah, I kind of
restarts would definitely be a nice feature. It's always kind of a pleasant polish thing to make it so that games can reset themselves, unless it's like a really elaborate game and there's sort of functional reasons why you couldn't get away with doing that.
Okay. Hail the Fish with crap eating. Oh wait, whoops. I just dragged the cartridge into the wrong tab. There we go. Do that.
So this is the earlier attempt made by Hail the Fish that was originally submitted. And it's basically just kind of like a wall ball thing. You bounce the ball and try not to drop it. And this one is very small and simple and doesn't have a lot of gameplay. But he did some more iteration on it and turned it into what I think is a much more interesting game. If you open up Infinibreaker, that's sort of like the party version.
Ooh, dark mode.
Yeah, so this is, like we've seen a few other games, this is using the portrait instead of landscape layout. And this is a breakout game with breakout physics. And its gimmick is that as you get enough points, it will add more bricks, thus the infinite part. And I do, as I mentioned in the channel, I think that single pixel breakout is kind of cruel. But once you can manage to get it wedged in there and get a combo, it goes a bit faster.
I have a very soft spot for Arkanoid, for sure.
And this is a pretty competent implementation.
I was going to ask, actually, John, on your screen, does the ball seem like it moves as fluidly as you think it would be?
Yeah, it's rotating. It is freaking out, seemingly.
There we go.
On my screen, it seems like the ball is just like a weird, turbulent. I can't even describe it. It is just freaking out.
That's very interesting. I wonder if
positioning itself.
I was wondering if it's only allowed to move horizontally or vertically in a single frame, rather than necessarily both.
Ooh.
But so yeah, as it builds up more layers and drops down, it starts to sort of feel like Puyo Pop in a weird way. Oh,
With these games, there's always a bummer when you do good and then you have to wait through the slow bit again.
That's true, yeah.
It seems like they're doing some sort of randomness with the direction just to keep it from staying up and down.
I would have liked to see sort of multiple lives in this game or something, because it's a lot more fun once it starts really going, and it takes a while to kind of get to that point.
Yeah.
Oh,
Some multiple.
oh. It's so satisfying. Oh, I had that though. Yeah, I'm done. I was robbed.
Yeah. We all saw it.
Jay, do we want to play Applejack?
We could take a look at it really quickly. So I made 3 submissions this year that are all sort of a implementation of a programming language. So of the 3, there's Applejack, which is sort of a tiny version of K or APL. The controls for this are you're building an abstract syntax tree for a little program. You use the up and down arrow keys to sort of cycle through options that you can have, and write to confirm. John, if you just restarted, I could sort of walk you through making something really, really simple.
Okay.
So if you press down, so this would be referencing a variable, 1 down. This would be an assignment, 1 down. This is a monadic or a unary operator. Press right. Now this first option is iota. Press right to confirm. This needs to be given a numeric argument. Press right to enter a number. Now you can use up to go up to, like, not 255. Do like 6 or something, and then press right. And so this is generate a range up to 6. Let's take a look at bulb. So same sort of thing, except this is now Lisp. If you press right to reference an existing variable, press up until you get to F. Press right. So this is a pre-entered program that is like calculate terms of the Fibonacci sequence. We can just call this function to sort of show you what that looks like. If you press down, this would be calling a function. Press right. Press up until you have F. Press right. Press down, or sorry, up to enter a number. Press right and put in like 4. And so then you complete the term, and it sits there for a while thinking, and then it tells you that the 4th term of the Fibonacci sequence is 5. This is something that is perhaps interesting to programmers, but probably pretty boring for a stream.
It's pretty neat, actually.
I'm going to say that's nuts that this works.
And this isn't using exochip stuff. This is strictly using S-chip. So it fits in 4 kilobytes of RAM. It fits in a somewhat reasonable speed, and it's not fast.
And it's
I like the input method, though. I feel like through this kind of line of thought, you could kind of create a programming language or a wrapper for one that works with like an Xbox controller, which would make programming super accessible for people with disabilities and stuff like that. I know for me, there are days where my mouse hand doesn't work that great.
It's not very fun when you're doing complicated programs, but it does work. And since I don't have the option of entering programs like with a full keyboard, this is the best compromise I could come up with. And with something like a Lisp, it's kind of nice because it's enough guidance on the syntax that you never have to enter any parentheses manually. It closes, terms for you and all that stuff. So the third one is Squad, and this is an implementation of Forth. This is kind of the most powerful, but it doesn't have the easiest ways to demonstrate what's going on. press right to enter a number. Put in like 2. Press right, and then press right to enter another number and put in like 3. Press right, and now if you press Z, it'll show you what's on the 4th stack. So you've got a 2 and then a 3 on top. Press down. Press down. So these are environment stuff, down again. Flow control stuff, down again. Memory access, reading and writing stuff, down again. Core, press right. And we'll just use the plus to add 2 things on the stack. Press right. And then press Z again. And you can see that it's added the 2 numbers that we had on the stack. Now, one more thing. Go to env, environment stuff.
Right here?
Yeah, just cycle through until you get to environment.
Okay, yeah.
And just choose words. And so this is all of the built-in words and vocabulary that the system has. So if you want to look at the source for all of these are, the octocarts are available, and there's a manual for each one of these that explains what the hell is going on, if you're interested enough to dig further.
So what would be the use case for something like this? There was one.
Well, it's a little bit neat in the sense that you would be able to use these programming languages on your calculator in like a toy kind of educational context. It's not very useful. It's really mainly a tech demo of trying to see how much functionality I could cram into 4 kilobytes.
So when you actually interact with the HP48, one of the things you learn is that the only way that you can actually program it for it directly is in assembly. And assembly isn't great to program in sometimes, as we know from making these Chip 8 games.
Especially on a Saturn, which is significantly weirder than Chip 8.
Yeah, it's got like 64-bit registers that are all separated by nibbles. It's super weird. And so just writing a simple program to do a straightforward task on the calculator itself isn't necessarily incredibly easy.
Yeah, this is still busted. We did
so
Tom Mars game.
So we've got
the next one.
What we have left on my list is 2 by Verisimilitude, and then my game Chicken Scratch, and then I think that's everything.
Did we play Sneaks Around? Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so we'll do Chicken Scratch next. Ooh.
So this is
Nice.
This is the actual game that I worked on this time. I think it's pretty straightforward. You're a chicken, run around, get some bugs.
Wow, the physics on this are great.
You can press space or E to peck at the ground, and that's how you get the bugs.
Nice. I like the scrolling. The scrolling looks really nice.
Yeah, that was kind of the big tech demo for this. And additionally, if you want to find out where the bugs are, as any chicken owner could tell you, you could use a chicken's natural ability to echolocate. Press Q.
Nice.
That's very cool.
It's sort
I
of
like the art. I like the little echolocation art.
Whoa, that text treatment looked really nice.
So I tried to make the like transitions and things really juicy. It's not quite as fancy as Tom's, but I'm gunning for the same kinds of effects. It's sort of like Pac-Man in reverse, but not quite as varied as Pac-Man is. It kind of feels to me like the start of some pretty interesting gameplay, but it's a little threadbare as it is.
Yeah, I feel like you could retrofit this to be like a top-down Legend of Zelda DX style like adventure game. Recenter the camera so you can see ahead of yourself more.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the physics and the mechanics here feel really tight.
I'm interested to know what upgrades we can get for our chicken.
Are there?
Well, none yet, but that is a good point. You should definitely be able to upgrade your chicken.
Yeah, eventually you should eat as you eat bugs, you should get slightly bigger and bigger, and then the later levels you're just smashing through the walls.
There's definitely enough room in the game to flesh out more content, more enemies. I'm running a little bit tight on code space, but not too bad. So this is definitely not the limit of what I could do with this sort of scrolling technique.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. That was my next question: is how much code space you had left after all this? Say no, just like Masty said, like if you do anything with any sort of smooth interpolation, like you're doing with the momentum here, it seems to get pretty complex.
Well, the physics are a lot simpler than some of these other games because ultimately you are still constrained to a grid. It's kind of Pokemon or Zelda logic. There you go. It took you 2 minutes and 38 seconds to get all the bugs.
That was awesome. You won your own game jam. All right, so then we have verisimilitude, advanced asphyxiation.
So this was one of 2 games submitted by Verisimilitude, who has participated in the past and didn't want to use itch.io this time. So they just emailed me Chip 8 ROMs. And as was discussed last year, they're using their own programming system and writing these things directly in machine code. So the code that you see in this is just Octo's disassembler doing its best job to show you its interpretation of what's going on. This first game is an exploration of an interesting maze drawing technique that was featured in the Atari 2600 game Entombed. And so it's basically using a random cellular automata to generate mazes that generally you can navigate, and you can move the player around and try not to get squashed. You also have the ability, I think if you press 0, you switch to the other game.
Switch to the other game. So press 0.
If you press 0, you can sort of carve out a block from the maze in front of you. And in Entombed, this was sort of the solution to the fact that sometimes you get an unwinnable level. And as you can see, it in the Chip 8 version, it toggles. So you need to be very precise about where you use that in order to actually dig a hole as opposed to making things worse.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And this does include frame rate limiting code, so it's going to go at about that speed.
All right, so what's this enhanced edition?
So this is extra enhanced Enchantment. It's a different game. It's kind of a minimalist bullet hell. I think it's an interesting gameplay concept. Basically, you just get a bunch of lines that you're trying to avoid. And normally, you'd think that you just opened up the profile.
Yeah, I know. I'm pressing every key to try and figure out what to do.
So you use it's on the Chip 8 keypad. It's 2468. So it's kind of I think that's
I do not have a numpad. I do not have a numpad.
Well, it would be different anyway.
2SQE. Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a minimalist bullet hell. You're trying to avoid all of these lines. And because the lines XOR with one another, they will often leave you like a little narrow way to escape.
Right.
It's very hard sometimes, but I think it's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I like that. I really like the idea that they leave you little rooms to escape. You have to kind of like predict as they're coming in.
Yeah. Figure out how to maneuver into a place that you'll think you'll have some open area on. The only real problem is that when the game goes on long enough, it becomes extremely hard. It's difficult to figure out how you would modify this in order to give it a little bit of a gentler curve. Maybe you specifically try to have it erase some of the lines after a while, like on top of one another. You could kind of tune the way that you're randomly laying them out in order to have that effect.
Yeah, or maybe give the player a short burst of like a Pac-Man style power-up where they can just bust through and create a bunch of walls or a bunch of openings.
The other alternative would be you could do something a la Ikaruga, like make it so that the player can kind of like move onto the solid stuff, and then they have to stay in the filled in parts and like choose when to make that transition based on how busy the screen is. Because over time, it'll start to clear itself too. And if you made some minor modifications to remove the collision detection from this, I think it'd make a pretty great screensaver.
2 jams at once, then. All right, very cool. Is that all?
Yep, that's all of them.
All right. Let's bring back the logo. There we go. Do we have any final words?
Sure. So I just want to thank everybody who participated in Octo Jam this year. This is the best year that we've had so far in terms of submission count, and I'm really looking forward to what happens on next year for Octo Jam 8. I want to give special thanks to Tobias VL and Tom R. For all of the work that they did to help get the word out, and everybody who participated. So thanks. And I hope to see most of you next year.
Yeah. As an outsider, someone who's never touched Octo, it's amazing to see what the community can do with such a limited platform. It's really amazing. Thank you to everyone.
It feels like each new jam, people figure out new ways to eke out something impressive, and a lot of just surprising submissions this time around.
It's really amazing. Yeah, it's like the artistic. When you limitate, what you can do, the creativity becomes that much more amplified.
Well, actually, something I wanted to say is that some of the tools that we've been getting, especially from UIJ, have been getting so good. Like a lot of the things that I've been doing have been able to make progress in the areas that they have made progress in, because I haven't had to spend time making like a graphics interpreter deal with a particular issue that I need to figure out. So like all the work you've been putting into the tools has really made it so much easier to do the things that we have been. So
yeah, and as we get better tools, then we can reach higher and higher, even though we have the same fundamental constraints to work with.
All right.
Yeah, anyway, thanks everybody, and see you next year.
All right. Bye everybody. Everyone say bye.
It easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.